So I tell people, I'm transparent. I say, look, let's get you lean. This is what you want. You are still going to get to work out, but you need to realize that during this phase of your journey, this is not the time to hit a PR. Like you're not going to max deadlift when you're in this cut. So just know that you're going to go through your routine, but you're not going to break records.
Hey, welcome to the First Optimal podcast here with Molly McKennedy. Really excited to have her on for all of you and looking forward to diving into all kinds of things health related, Molly's journey and all of her expertise. And so thanks so much for jumping on. Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, I love this. Thanks so much for having me. I feel completely honored that you even asked.
Of course. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to get a ton of value out of today's episode. So before we get into all the fun stuff, I thought maybe if you can kind of high level, give us a little bit about, what specifically you do, who you work with, and then we'll kind of dive into your story a little bit and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do, I am a health coach. I specialize primarily in nutrition programs for weight loss. So I have a degree in exercise and sports studies from the University of Texas. So, a lot of knowledge on exercise, but this really allows me to help everyone because everybody has to eat food. So, if you're wanting to lose weight, nutrition is definitely the way to start. And I primarily help people, men and women actually, and usually between the ages of late 30s to all the way up to 70.
Sure.
Because when you're in your 20s, you're typically not struggling too much. So I find that later in life, is when things really start to hit and people are struggling and looking for help.
Yeah, no. And I was thinking about, as I was preparing for our conversation today, I was looking at some of your content, prior to that as well, obviously, but, did you start lifting around 16? I believe I saw an image where you had some dumbbells and you're 16. So
yeah,
you could tell, like, how long have you been doing this? And obviously, college was a big part. You invest a lot of time and effort into learning about this. So how long have you been kind of overall in just the coaching industry and working with so many people?
So coaching industry, 10 years. I'm 49, so I'm turning 50 this year. I got into nutrition and weight training when I was 16. And look, my friends thought I was weird because at 16, that's not what people are doing. I had a little bit of a crazy phase too, but I'd say I graduated high school with a pretty good head on my shoulders. And I was pretty driven and focused and just super interested in the human body. I saw women like Linda Hamilton from the Terminator, Gail Devers, the track star, Corey Everson, the famous female bodybuilder. So these are women that I would look at their pictures and just think that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, just that physique. And I just wanted to obtain that for myself. And I was around the age 16 when I started seeing women like this. Prior to that, I hadn't really seen muscular women, and I think Linda Hamilton is really kind of the one that made that just so freaking awesome. And when she was doing those chin-ups in the movie, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
I think everybody knows that scene. So
sure.
Yeah. So that was my, silly little inspiration to go figure out how can I get that for myself?
Yeah. Mine was, not as healthy of an example, maybe because it was Pumping Iron by Arnold Schwarzenegger, then Conan the Barbarian, right? As a young boy watching it, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go outside and just push stuff and lift stuff and I'll look like that. But I'm curious too, because I was talking to someone on a few episodes ago, because I started as a trainer in 2000. And I remember very few women that we used to have like a carpeted area. There was like all these, the treadmills, the cardio. Then we had like this carpeted area with like some machines. And it was like, this is where the guys train. Not that it was like a rule, but you saw like one female, like one woman come over by like free weights and hammer strength equipment and all that. So I'm curious, it sounds like probably the 90s ish, is when you kind of were getting into this. What was that like? Did you experience a similar thing? Was it kind of, hey, what are you doing? Because it wasn't as a social norm as it is, as it's been for some time now. But so I'm dating myself a little bit, but I think I guess, can you talk a little bit about that transition in your experience?
Yeah. Well, when I went to the gym for the first time, I was on the treadmill. I went to the gym as a runner, a competitive runner. And so weight training wasn't really like, something I was doing. It's a funny story. So this guy walked up to me when I was on the treadmill and he said, "Hey, there's a running group. We meet at 5 a.m. If you ever want to come run with us." And I'm like, "You're insane. Nice guy, but you're crazy." I ended up marrying him, by the way. But we kept bumping into each other at the gym, and he lifted weights too. So he was a triathlete and he was lifting weights. So fortunately, this was a very sort of intimate gym setting. It wasn't like a Planet Fitness or some of these huge gyms where you've got thousands of people looking at you when you're working out. This was a pretty intimate setting, small town. And so there weren't a lot of people in the gym, period. And so that, took the intimidation away for me. So I was fortunate in that regard, but he just kind of like took me under his wing and, we just kept at it. And, before you know it, you turn around and you're like, wow, I've been doing this weight training thing for a year. Like I know what I'm doing now. I can walk into any gym,
feel confident.
And, I know what to do.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And it was, so Jen Thompson, she's, like the GOAT in women's, natural powerlifting. And if you like saw a picture of her, she's a school teacher, you'd be like, she's a powerlifting champion. I mean, she looks fit, don't get me wrong, but she benches well over 300 pounds and she weighs like 135 pounds. My point is, very similar story, like, and actually married the guy that approached her in a gym. So
That's
guys,
so
it's kind of creepy, but nowadays, but back then it seemed to work. So
yeah.
I guess the guys had better game back then, but yeah, it was just kind of interesting. He was a strength coach and such, and got her into it. And now she's who she went on to become. And we kind of had a conversation about that as well, like that transition, because I think and we'll get into the weeds more with your experiences in programming. But on this topic, I'm curious, women in that 35, 40 to 60 age bracket, I feel like that's still not for all of them. There's been a lot of awareness, but that's still kind of the mental block is like, well, I remember back then, and then maybe, kids, family, career, maybe they got, just weren't doing some exercise and going to the gym, things like that. And now they're starting that later in life, and they still have this, I don't want to say negative, but this false relationship with resistance or strength training. I mean, do you find that with a lot of specifically the women that are coming in to talk to you? Is it in that age group? Is it kind of still that old school thought of like bulky, or I shouldn't do this, or I should be cardio queen, or whatever the case is?
Yeah, a little bit. I do think we're doing a pretty good job as a society promoting women lifting weights. I mean, and maybe I'm biased because I see it a lot because of the field I'm in. And so like my social media is full of women who lift weights because Instagram knows that's what I'm all about. So maybe I'm a little biased and maybe not accurate, but like you said, I think there's more awareness now. I do still occasionally get the phone call from a female who needs to lose weight and I'm talking her through my program. She'll mention, exercise and what should I be doing? And hey, doesn't strength training like make you bulky? So I do still get that. And it's hard to get bulky. I mean, it takes a lot to put on muscle.
Right.
It's not like, I mean, unless you're just genetically gifted, like you're one of those rare people that you just go lift, a dumbbell and you've instantly got biceps. But it takes a lot of work to be able to get bulky. And a lot of times it takes special, substances as well. So
Right.
I do see it a little bit, but I do appreciate the awareness that I think is out there now around this. And I feel like it's constantly being talked about through like scientific studies and, like Harvard School of Medicine and Harvard Health and, all these journals are doing studies on women in strength training, specifically women who are premenopausal or going through menopause.
Yeah. No, I remember there was a study in the early 2000s that showed the number one indicator of assisted living versus non-assisted living was resistance training. And we're
Wow.
talking like CDC guidelines. It was like 30 minutes a day. I think it was 4 movements, 8 to 12 reps, 3 sets, really basic. And it was the number one indicator. And they had, some larger model that they did in the research. But I remember coming home and trying to talk to some of the older women in my family, or grandmas and aunts and such, but it was still just this like, well, I don't want to look like you, because I was competing in strength sports at the time, and I'm like, no, like that's not what I'm saying. I'm like, oh, never mind. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just these
Yeah.
are things that help you, and it was just really eye opening. I was like, oh, okay, never really thought of that. And early in my training career, I used that a lot, because I would get I'll recall a client who, one of her number one things is, she was just like, I just don't want to slip on the ice anymore. And I struggle bringing my groceries in the house. And I'm sitting there, little 21-year-old, trainer, fresh with my education, think I know it all, and, getting into the strength sports. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, luckily I was introduced to a really good certification at the time, which was National Academy of Sports Medicine. And they really did a nice job, like breaking down someone who's completely sedentary and how to bring them in. But it was just that eye-opening thing, like, oh yeah, like this isn't all about what I'm all about, right? Like, this is different. So
She opened your eyes to functional fitness,
exactly.
the whole concept, which everybody knows about now. Like,
Right.
just fitness for survival, right? Like just going up your flight of stairs or getting off the couch. I mean, that's important.
Right. Right. Well, and I'm curious too, this just, you've been doing this for so long, and all the years of not only education, but practical experience. What are maybe 1 or 2 things in your personal journey that you feel has helped you at this point, like working with clients? Does anything stick out where it was nutrition or training related?
So let me understand the question. You're wanting to know specifically for me what's been impactful or
Yeah, just maybe something with your experiences and how you're able to apply that in your programs with your clients.
so yeah, I mean, from a nutrition standpoint, before I became a nutrition coach, I had to kind of learn how to get this right for myself,
Mhm.
obviously. And I mean, this is what attracted me to want to help others. I mean, I think a lot of times we kind of fall into career paths or doing things because there was an area that we struggled in our
Mhm.
life, regardless of what it is, finances, nutrition, computers, whatever. You struggled with it and you figured it out. And now you've got the answer and you want to help other people. Right. So
Sure.
for me, it was, and something that, my clients do is the frequently feeding yourself throughout the day. So, managing that blood sugar. I had to learn that for myself. So, that's something that I apply in my programs too, is, before I came into this, I learned that there's a certain amount of energy my body requires each day to maintain itself.
Right.
So restricting food all day, thinking that's the win, never worked because you would come home from school or work and you're so hungry because you tried the I'm just not going to eat all day tactic.
Mhm.
And now your blood sugar is low and you want to eat your arm.
Right.
So I got tired of doing that. And I realized, okay, this is stupid. I need a certain amount of energy each day. This we know. Okay. This is science. So to sustain yourself, you have to eat food. So if I need X amount of calories a day to sustain myself, then why don't I just kind of break that down into small meals throughout the day so that at the end of the day, I've hit my calorie budget. Um, I feel good. My body is, responding well. I'm managing the blood sugar. And then on top of that, frequently eating protein throughout the day too. It takes more energy to break down protein than it does
Right.
carbohydrates or fats. So just by including more protein in your diet, you are kicking up that metabolism.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing I learned for myself and, implement in with my strategies for my clients.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic of protein, because I do see a little bit of obsession on the minimum sedentary person protein requirement that's published by the CDC. And, I'll even post content or see content, and you'll always see someone in the comments like, you only need this many per grams per kilogram. It's like, I'm just, I guess I want to formulate this into a question, because I'm too stuck in my own head about my own thoughts on it. But it's, I wonder, like, how does that come up for you? I guess is my first question. Do you find that men, women, they kind of generally will come to you under eating protein, or have a misconception of, how much protein they need?
That's a very confusing topic and probably controversial at this point. How much protein? I think everybody's walking around on this planet trying to figure that out. But yeah, a lot of women, especially, I would say, are not getting enough protein and fiber. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
you can, they're both important. But
sure.
yeah, the protein thing, yes. I spoke with a woman the other day who we were walking through what her day looks like food wise. Cause I always try to get in their life. Like, what does your day look like? Tell me what you eat. That way I can gauge, how drastically different is my program going to be for you? Like, or maybe you're almost there already. We just need to tweak a couple things. Right. But I can get a snapshot of their life. And she went through the whole day, and I don't think I heard any protein in there. I mean, and protein can be cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. It can be a whey protein shake. It can be steak, chicken, fish. I mean, there's I think people don't know
What? Yeah, it's a good source, right?
what's a good source. And to me, that seems so foreign, just like probably to you. Like, I just think everybody knows what protein is because I've been doing this for so long. I think you forget that the general population probably doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I saw, I think there's 2 points too, and I want to unpack them for the audience a little bit more. But one of them was, so Don Layman, I think is how you say his name. So he's a professor at the University of Minnesota, and like some of the popular influencers like Dr. Gabrielle Leon studied underneath him, got her PhD from him, and then I believe Dr. Lane Norton too did. But my point is, he had a really interesting study that women as a percent of total calories, pick a number, I forget the exact number to study, but let's say it's like 30% of their dietary need is protein. And in their 20s, the volume of calories, right, like their total amount is so high that that's enough to meet their minimum requirements to just maintain their lean tissues. And then over time, as they eat less and less and less, because their appetite goes down as they age, their percent stays the same. So it keeps going down. And basically his argument, or his findings were, there's like an absolute threshold, and I'm picking a number. Let's say it's 100 grams. And when you were 20, that 30% of your total calories, 100 grams is fine to preserve it. But when you're 50, you still need the 100, but now your load, your total caloric intake is down. So that percent's going to be higher. And I thought that was a really interesting, like, cause he was looking at lifespan protein requirements and protein needs. And I just felt like that's a really easy way for people to conceptualize what could be happening later in life with the loss of lean tissue. Cause they're like, you just hit it on the head. Like, well, I eat protein. And they're like, okay, well, let's track it. And like, well, I had peanut butter and I had peanuts. And it's like, okay, this is a whole different, because that was one of the questions I had is, what are some things maybe out there that you find that people mistakenly track as peanut butter, my mind's peanut butter, track on protein, or like track for, calculate or whatever in that area of their nutrition.
Well, peanut butter is a good one. It cracks me up when someone says peanut butter is a source of protein, or it is a source of protein. I think there's 5 or 6 grams in a serving, but okay, a serving of peanut butter is 200 calories.
Right.
Okay, there's only 5 grams of protein in that. So I don't count that as high protein
Right.
at all.
Right.
High protein to me is within a 200 calorie piece of food, you've got at least 20 to 25 grams of protein. To me,
Yeah.
that would be considered a high protein food.
Yeah.
So
That's a good, easy kind of way that people can conceptualize that. That's good.
same thing, like if I'm looking at protein bars, a lot of
Mhm.
people use bars, including myself,
Sure.
to supplement and just, make life easy. If it's a 200 calorie bar, it better have 20 grams of protein. I mean, if it doesn't, then I'm moving on and finding another one.
Well, one of the things that comes up with me, and I'd love to hear if there's other ones, or that I shouldn't say with me, but that I hear out there from coaches. But I love to, if there's another one to add to this, but is their clients' ability to like prep and plan is the biggest hurdle for them. It's not even really like that they don't want to eat it or whatever. And I know you have some really good content. So for those of you out there, definitely check out Molly's Instagram about like different snacks that you like to use and things like that. I'm just curious, like, how do you approach that? What are some tips you give people when they're first starting, as far as whether it's meal prepping or snacks or planning and all those things, with, life being so busy as it can get?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's every client I help. Life is busy. We are just, there's always something to do.
Right.
So here's the thing is make it easy.
Right.
Make it so simple that you can't fail. And so what that looks like for me and my clients is you're not changing up what you eat every single day of the week. Okay. So, you like, ground turkey, let's say. So that's going to be part of your meal for the next 4 days. Make a bunch of ground turkey, pair it with the vegetable you like. Let's put the seasonings on it that you like. Let's get the amount that you need based on the plan I gave you, and like on repeat. So we're going to make this simple. You
Right.
don't need a different dinner every night of the week. So find what you like.
Sure.
Don't eat food you hate. Pick the protein from the list that you get, and then
Yep.
pick your vegetables that you like. And let's just get on repeat here. And then, you know what? When you get tired of that meal, then that's when you change it up. Create another one. And then now you've got another meal in your database. So, and then, over the course of time, now you've got 10 meals that
Right.
hit the goals that you need. So they're in the parameters of the protein you need, the vegetables you need, the carbs, all that. You've got your little database now. So that's what I do. I
Sure.
tell people, look, you're a mom, you've got 3 kids, you've got a husband who works all the time. You're running people here, running people there. Let's just make this easy.
Yeah. Just make it a habit, right? Just like brushing your teeth. It's just, I got to prep this. I have to do this, or
Yeah.
whatever the case is. Yeah.
And the other thing too is, don't forget, you can grab a rotisserie chicken for $6. I mean,
Sure. Sure.
go get a chicken, and you're coming home from cheerleading practice with your daughter, just swing in, grab a chicken, then you're set. You've got the protein you need, and you can make them whatever, but
Right.
keep you on track. You can do eggs for dinner. There's nothing wrong with that. That's easy. So
Yeah. A lot of options. So it, it sounds like, you provide a food list for your clients with the nutrition piece. Can you talk a little more, like, what does the intake look like? What are some things that, how you like to start the relationship or start the plan with somebody when they're just getting going with it?
So intake, you mean nutrition wise, or the intake of me bringing on a new client?
Yeah, I think just starting with the first step, right? Like when they come on with you, and then
Okay.
transitioning into the application of nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah. So typically what happens is I utilize social media. So someone will reach out to me and just say, hey, I'd like to learn more about your nutrition plans. And so I'll send them my assessment,
Mm.
my wellness evaluation. And that's really just so I can gauge and make sure they're a good fit for what I do.
Sure.
Um, I can help most people, but sometimes if I see there's just a ton of food allergies and a lot going on there, you know, my nutrition plan may be a struggle. And
Sure.
so, then I would advise, hey, stay up on your labs, make sure you get your testing, come back to me. Maybe we can work something out. That's where lab testing is really handy.
Sure.
And then, so anyways, if they are a candidate, then basically I match the plan that's right for them. So if they're sedentary, I've got a plan that works really well, for that group of people. It's a little lower calorie than the one I would advise for my athletes. Now, I do get a lot of women and men who are fit.
Mm-hmm.
They're active, they're lifting weights 4 days a week, or are doing, CrossFit, or, they're running. I've worked with endurance athletes, but they're still carrying around the 10 to 15 pounds.
Sure.
And, they're frustrated. So I've got a plan for them. It's a little bit higher calorie than somebody who would be sedentary, obviously. And for them, I would say we need to work together when you're not in your competitive season, because you don't really want to restrict calories when you're competing.
Right. Especially with endurance related, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like in a triathlon, or, an ultra run, or a marathon, something like that. It's really hard to be in a calorie deficit and train well. You have to have a gas tank full of glycogen. So I tell people, I'm transparent. I say, look, let's get you lean. This is what you want. You are still going to get to work out, but you need to realize that during this phase of your journey, this is not the time to hit a PR. Like, you're not going to max deadlift when you're in this cut. So just know that you're going to go through your routine, but you're not going to break records.
Sure. No, and I think that's good practice. And I'm sure that's why you've been successful too, from an integrity standpoint. It's not like you're trying to cram everybody into, this cookie cutter approach. And you're like, hey, let's wait 2 months. Let's wait till you're ready. Let's wait 3 months. It's something like I personally don't do as much coaching anymore, but I used to tell them, like, you either need a cook or a chef, coach, like I'm more, the cook. Like, I'll give you the macros and raw ingredients, but I'm not creative with my food. Like, you can ask my kids or my wife, like, it's just not good. I'm like, but if you need the chef, like, I'm probably not, the one for you if you're constantly looking for, well, how can I make this better? How can I make it taste better? And there's some brilliant coaches out there that, some of them even like have a culinary background, where I'm like, I am going to tell you, like, back in the day, I'd use the Foreman grill and like a rice cooker. Like, so you don't, your family's not going to like me. So, and you got to make sure it fits for you. Right. So, like, what is your style? And I think coaches that I've had the, great opportunity to talk to that are successful, like yourself, is they have their way and they make sure you're a fit. Right. So if you find yourself out there, for the audience, where someone's really trying to convince you to buy their deal or get started with it, it might be, buyer beware, right? You might got to pause and rethink that. So I think if they're asking a lot of qualifying questions, it's a good approach, and it's a good sign, because they're going to be honest and direct you there. But
right. Yeah. And I always tell people on the phone call, so they submit their form, and then I send my calendar link, and then we jump on a 15-20 minute phone call. And I always say, look, this is for you to get educated about what I do. It's not a pressure call, but I'm going to share the way that I've been helping people, and a very effective path. And it's up to you. If you want to partner together, I would love that. But, if it's not for you, then that's okay too. We're still friends. I still love you.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Don't unfollow. No.
Don't unfollow me.
or bash me in the comments. No.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's, because you mentioned earlier too, you have men and women coming through to meet with you. I'm curious of, first, maybe some similarities with men and women that are coming in that you see. What are some patterns, maybe in, have it be their mental state, or maybe it's their understanding of how to do things, maybe common myths they come in with? Are there any that come to mind to you that are kind of similar between both men and women?
Confusion. I mean, I just think across the board, there's so much information out there that, it's kind of like, and I'm not saying this in a snarky way, but it's like, we've almost lost our common sense.
Right.
I think, and nutrition really doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. And I think sometimes we're weeding through so much muck, especially on social media, which social media is great, but it's also like there's so much information out there that you almost have to put blinders on sometimes and just, put your head down and like just do what works. But yeah, there's confusion. And probably one of the biggest questions I get is about fasting.
Mm,
So, I get asked, do I fast? Because people don't always know what my program is when they're
sure.
approaching me. They don't know anything about it. And so they might ask, like, is this a fasting plan? Or, what do you think about fasting? So I think across the board, everyone's very interested in that. And based on what I shared with you earlier about the kind of frequently feeding yourself throughout the day, obviously it's not fasting.
Sure.
That's a whole nother podcast, by the way.
Right. Of course.
But yeah, just confusion. And then, fasting, I get questions from men and women about that. And then just the time thing, which you brought up, what do you do when you just don't have time?
Time.
That's a
Yeah.
big problem for everybody.
And I think that's where, a good coach comes in, right? Because it's like, hey, we can help you navigate this stuff. If you were trying to organize your finances, like, and you hired a finance coach or an expert in that area or an accountant or whatever, like you would be blown away at like how many things they can help you be so much more efficient on. It's the same application with exercise and nutrition, right? So it's just, for people to reach out and just have a conversation and figure out, how to help, because there's some people much, much more creative than I am online that someday I may mirror their techniques. But where they like the clips where it's like, I get up at 4 a.m., I do my journal, then I do 20 burpees, then I start my 3-mile run, then I come back, I read 5 affirmations, then I go in my cold plunge, then I shower, then I get in the sauna, and it's just like,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Like it's a joke, is what some of these guys are like, guys and girls are doing, making fun of like. There's like 17 different clips that they'll pull in of what you should be doing. And
Yeah.
no wonder people are confused, because like the one guy was hilarious. He was like drinking water, and another guy popped up and said, "Don't drink water." He spits the water out. Then it's like eating an apple. Don't eat fruit. He spits the fruit out. Then it's like,
Yeah.
don't eat meat. Don't be, you should be carnivore. You should be vegan. And so it's, I think it's, like you said, it's well, I think a lot of it's well-intended. At least I like to give people the benefit of the doubt on that. But if you're someone out there and you don't know, you didn't study this, there's PhDs in this for a reason. It can be complicated from a distance, but then once you kind of zoom into someone who knows it, they can break it down just like any other expert can. Like, if you went to advanced physics class, you'd be just completely lost. But if you sat down with a professor and he broke down basic concepts, you go, oh, well, that makes sense. But if I'm
Right.
reading all these numbers and formulas and symbols, it's like, I have no clue. Like I have a good friend who went back for his PhD in physics just for fun. And just having a conversation with him, he could break stuff down. And I was just like, in that area, I was so much smarter in that area just from having conversations with him, let alone
That's awesome.
picking up a textbook, so the ability to break it down, I guess my point as coaches. So,
Yeah.
Getting back to some of the men and women coming in, what about some differences? Like maybe if we tackle men first, are there certain areas that men struggle with, or myths they have, or more confusion for men versus women? And then we can tackle women next.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the men overall, I would say they're a little torn because they know, and this is general, this is very general. Okay.
Sure.
But like
Yeah, of course.
most men want to keep their muscle mass, right? And we know when you go into a little bit of a cut, you do run the risk of, there is going to be a little muscle mass loss. I mean, that's just kind of, it just is.
Right.
Now we can offset that obviously by making sure you are getting enough protein. I advise supplementation with creatine.
Yep.
If you're in a deficit, I think essential amino acids is probably a good idea as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can do things to kind of help offset that. But I think the struggle for men is like, yes, I want to lose the weight. No, I don't want to lose muscle. And so I'll get like on their intake form, I want to gain muscle and lose fat, So that's, I think for men, maybe, kind of the biggest hurdle maybe, that
Sure.
they have to get over is, And I'll just say, look, what's most important to you right
Pick
now?
it. Yeah.
Like, do you want to put on muscle, or do you want to lean out and look ripped? Like,
Right.
what do
Right.
you want? When you're just laying down at night, what is it that you want for yourself?
Right.
So if at the end of the day, I want to look more lean, like I work out really hard already. I need these abs to show.
Right. Well, I think a lot of guys don't realize that 3D effect, that really pop look. Like when you see, granted there's other things involved in, bodybuilding, but when you see that 3D look with the bodybuilder, it's primarily because there's no fat there. So the roundness and the fullness of the muscles, I think a lot of guys actually probably carrying a lot more muscle than they realize if they drop the fat, and I think that at least in some experiences, and but I think you're dead right, where you just do a phase, do one,
Mhm.
focus on one, and then shift to the other. But
Yep.
no, that's a really good one. And then you mentioned, creatine. Obviously there's a ton of applications. I mean, there's, you know, people very, very late in life using it for cognitive function now that's been well
Right.
studied and documented, and high safety efficacy. I think it's the most researched supplement in human studies.
It's gotta be.
Yeah. And one of the questions that come up for me, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little about creatine, how it works, or, just some tips there. But I have had actually one or two men, not many, but a couple men, and a lot of women that were like, well, doesn't creatine cause me to put on weight? And so I kind of unpacked that for them, but I'm just curious, do you ever get that question? And then maybe you can talk a little bit about creatine more for those out there listening.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that creatine actually increases the production of ATP, which
Mhm.
is adenosine triphosphate. Am I saying that right?
Sounds right.
ATP,
Yep.
which allows your muscle to do more.
Sure.
So if you can do more with your muscle, then that increases the likelihood of building more muscle. So as far as the gaining weight, so what I get asked about a lot is bloating. So
Hmm.
like the creatine bloat, and I've had great success with like a creatine HCl, hydrochloric acid, which that's what I take, and I have no issue with bloating. Now I
Okay.
have had an issue with bloating using some other forms of creatine, like monohydrate.
Oh, really? Okay.
I have
I've heard it. I just haven't personally had that issue. That's why I was just curious about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and men seem to not have a real issue with that as much as women for some reason. And I don't know what the bloat's from, if it's just more water being kind of pulled in or
Probably. Yeah.
what. But I remember looking in the mirror after being on creatine for a little while, and I was like, I don't even recognize my waist. Like,
Mm.
what is that? And I went off of it for about 6 months and then did some research, read up on, the HCl version, and I thought, let me give this a try. Plus, at that time, as you discussed a little bit ago, the benefits to your brain, they're
Right.
finding all this information about brain health and creatine now too. So I thought, let me give it another go. And I
Sure.
haven't looked back. I've been taking 5 grams of creatine every day for like the past, I don't know, 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because the HCl, it's a really good tip. I don't think I've talked about that yet on a podcast for those who are struggling with it. I have seen benefit in some, but I do want to think a high percentage were men, so I don't want to mislead anybody. But because of 2 points that I wanted to add to that was like one, because of creatine's action of it's a good action and it driving intracellular fluid into the muscle, right? And in order to do that, it's got to grab sodium and fluid and do that. And what I found with some people, they were undernourished with their hydration and sodium levels. So I this is my theory. I haven't tested it,
Mhm. Okay.
but I just had a feeling that that's kind of why it was sitting more. But mind you, that again, this was with men, and I don't think it was as extreme as maybe some other people that really struggle with it. And I found that kind of helped. But conversely, with women, they would get a little worried because as they're strength training, you get these micro tears, which is good. All the nutrients and fluid going to the muscle, which weight may go up a tiny bit from that like inflammation, which is
Right.
good inflammation. And then they throw in creatine, and then it's like, and so it's kind of like, no, that's good. Like we want that. We want that nice healthy tissue. Like we want those things to happen, and you just kind of work through it these first couple weeks. So I'm just curious from the weight gain of resistance training or adding creatine. Is that an obstacle that people bring up like their first 4 weeks or 5 weeks where they're like, I'm not really seeing the scale because things are kind of shifting? And then if so, like, how do you navigate that with a client?
Well, it's not something that I've had to navigate much, to be honest. I mean, a lot of times what will happen is, someone will get to the weight that they want, and then now they're ready to start, ramping up their training. And so then I'll advise, the creatine, but I haven't really, I haven't had negative feedback on that. So it's not something that, like, I've had the occasional woman, reach out to me and just say, maybe she had a negative experience with creatine monohydrate, making her feel bloated. So then obviously I'll tell her what I know about the HCl. But it's not something that I've really, had to dive into a whole lot with my clients. But if they ask me about it, I definitely recommend it if they are going to be strength training, especially.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then, on the same kind of topic, and the only reason I brought up women bringing up the weight more is because, us guys, generally speaking, and I am a guy, so I don't think they'll get too mad at me for saying this, but we're a little bit of meatheads to where if the scale's going up, automatically it must be muscle. We're just putting on tons of muscle. For women, it's like automatically must be fat, right?
Isn't that funny?
It's just like this really, really interesting dynamic. Two husband and wife, the same household. One gets on a scale, he's up 3 pounds, he's pumped. The other one's up a half pound and she's like ready to give up and throw in the towel, right?
Yeah, so isn't that funny?
It's really interesting how they go through that. But I was curious too, like, just we were talking about men, but what are some differences maybe that women come in, different, obstacles or misunderstandings or whatever the case may be than what men have when they're coming in to see you?
Oh gosh, women are complicated. Well, we have a lot going on. And not that men don't, because, men have testosterone. And if that's low for a man, then, that's a real struggle. But I mean, for the women that I help, I think a lot of it is, maybe a hormone situation. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things that, I think women hear a lot is you just need to eat less and exercise more. Mm-hmm. That's going to get you where you want to be. And that's such a blanket statement. While that works well for a lot of people, especially if you're extremely consistent, there can be some complicated hormonal underlying issues for women we're still learning these things. Right. About women. And look, getting your labs done and getting checked, like if you're doing all the things, like you're honestly eating 1,200 calories a day and you're weight training 4 times a week and like nothing's happening and you're tired and you have low sex drive and, all these things and you're mad at everybody and you're sweating at night, all these things.
Right.
And you're doing everything right. Don't feel shame or embarrassed to go, get your labs done and see where you are.
What's going on?
All change in your hormones, could drastically benefit you. Like if you can get, if that is the problem,
Sure. What are some common markers you like to see a client get, or maybe you've seen that were, eye-opening for them after you got to get the results back for women?
Well, I think one of the biggest things right now that I'm discovering is the testosterone in women. This is something that's really fascinating to me. I think we've always associated testosterone with men. I mean, It's something guys must have. And, if they don't have enough testosterone, then it's terrible. They're tired, gain weight, can't gain muscle, don't sleep well, low energy. And here's the funny thing is that women are the same. Like if we don't have enough testosterone, so just talking from like a lab work scenario, like you had asked, I mean, like the testosterone thing is huge. Like we don't need much. Like we really don't need a lot, but if we're on the low end of what's optimal, then that's not good, So yeah, I think the whole testosterone thing is super interesting.
Yeah. I've seen it up to 15 to 20 years before like serious menopausal type, I say serious, but like the general population recognizing menopausal type symptoms like show up, if you will. That's kind of a perimenopause type symptom, what you would get with low T. But I've seen like just non-existent testosterone levels in women that you wouldn't think are of the age per se that should be experiencing that. So I think to your point, it's really, really good to test that, because that could be something to really bridge someone into, midlife and, those other perimenopause, menopausal years, to give them a lot more kind of lift and just some relief there, So
Right.
what's another marker that you like to look at, or you see maybe an issue with?
Another marker. Let's see.
You ever see women with like progesterone imbalances at all, or?
Not so much. No, I think the big one for me that I personally, and
Mhm.
this, I'm not speaking for everyone, but just for me working with women, I think the biggest one is the low testosterone. And
Yeah.
that's also kind of the most shocking one, I think, too. But maybe you can share a little bit about, maybe you've had some experience with women who have had low or progesterone.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Mainly it was just, that comes up a lot. Obviously low testosterone's a big one, but then progesterone will come up a lot, and you know, it's being masked with like, and again, there's certain application clinically with, anxiety, depression, with sleep issues, with
Mhm.
stress management. But I say this with a smile, because he was kind of serious, kind of funny. But two of my friends, a husband and wife, the husband gave me a big hug when I saw him. We were at a tournament, and his wife did after. But short or long, she's a phenomenal athlete, great shape, non-existent testosterone, non-existent progesterone. And one of the things that was like just super short-tempered, stressful, couldn't sleep at night, was never relaxed. So during certain times when her estrogen was getting higher and didn't really have the progesterone mimicking, rotating opposite of her estrogen levels, it was just overpowering. And then not having the testosterone as well. So that's really a big one, where I think it's masked as like anxiety, depression, or, well, you're just going through a stressful time. And it's like, those things are true, but our bodies by nature have mechanisms that should be able to work through a lot of that in a
Right.
more sustainable or reasonable amount, right? Like if I'm stressed, I'm going to feel it a little bit. But if it's completely disrupting my life, my interaction with my loved ones, almost like a personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, almost like, that's problematic. That's when, just go get some labs done. Just take a look.
Yeah.
Because it could be that. I noticed a big one, even personally, and not mentally how I handle stress. Because a lot of people also are very, strong-willed and strong-minded, and they can handle stress well. But physiologically, I noticed what manifested in me personally when I had certain hormones or micronutrients that were deficient. My body's ability from a biology standpoint, the physiology was rocked, and it would manifest in other ways that you wouldn't normally associate with stress. And I could have went and got on, some other like strong pharmaceutical, but it would have been misdiagnosed, which is
Right.
not the doctor's fault, right? Like they only get a certain amount of, your general practitioner only gets a certain amount of training, and a lot of it is from these high percentage, high prescribed medications that are more, a little less nuanced, where a lot of these hormones get, there's a lot of individualized care that needs to happen. And it really, the provider needs to specialize in that to kind of know how to work through that, which I know you have a lot of experience in the pharmacy world as well, and working with providers too. So, I don't know if you want to add to that a little bit as far as the medical field and just kind of interactions you've had.
Yeah. Yeah, I am partnered with a pharmacy that specializes in, BHRT,
Mhm.
hormone replacement therapy. And so that's been a lot of fun, being able to kind of round out, the nutrition wellness arena with, you know, getting, the hormones straight, because, as we've been talking about, that does so much for somebody as far as their overall well-being and their ability to have a body that functions the way that it's supposed to function.
Mhm.
And yeah, specifically what we do with the pharmacy that I'm partnered with, PPR is sublingual, which is kind of nice. It's a nice option for people who maybe they're adverse to shots or pellets or creams, and you just want something that, you can put under your tongue. It dissolves and it's a very quick delivery system.
Yeah. Just on the topic of testosterone to round that out, and then selfishly, I do have some other questions I want to make sure I get in
Sure. Yeah.
For the group, the people listening in, but I'm saying that more to myself because I can get us off track. But what are some common symptoms, maybe if man or woman's listening, what are some common symptoms that either men or women might experience if they're going through kind of low testosterone? Like, what are some symptoms you see being reported to you that it turns out it was related to that?
Yeah, low testosterone is related. I mean, the symptoms could be, as I kind of mentioned before, unexplained weight gain, inability to put on muscle mass, low sex drive, low energy. Those I think are the top 4. You may be able to add to that a little bit, but those are kind of the biggies right there.
Sure.
Is, if you're a guy and you're working out, 4 or 5 days a week with weights and you've got like a good solid program and you're not able to put on muscle, and you're tired, low energy, and just, weight gain, low sex drive, I would get checked. I mean, especially if you're doing things right, like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're, eating the protein, the vegetables, you're not, eating a bunch of junk, and you are exercising, like you're doing all those things, then if it were me, I would get checked.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people underutilize it, or maybe they again, their minds go to like the bodybuilder type thing, going back to the discussion we had about, strength training, where it's therapeutic doses. And, if you're going to go into a calorie deficit and you have low androgens, like you're definitely gonna be burning through lean body mass. It's actually going to help protect against some of that loss as well. Cause I've just found, you already mentioned creatine. I found if their androgens are off, fixing, some kind of supplement, like a good creatine, good hydration, that definitely helps combat some of that lean tissue loss when you're going into a calorie deficit. There certainly is some physics at play where the body's going to say, well, I don't need all this muscle, but it's going to definitely work a little more against that, or the loss, I guess, is one.
Right.
I did have a couple questions about like common myths or advice even. The first one would be just like a health tip or strategy that you feel like is vastly underutilized in women's health, but could have like a big impact. Is there anything that comes to mind with that?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest health tips that's underutilized, we talked about at the very beginning, is strength training. I mean, that and a foundation of nutrition, because if you've got a good foundation, this is where functional health really comes in play here, is, a foundation of solid nutrition. So here's the thing is there's nothing wrong with medication and there's nothing wrong with supplementation, but sure, I would never advocate somebody get on a bunch of medications or supplementations. That even includes a multivitamin until you are eating vegetables.
Yeah, right.
Are you eating vegetables every day, a couple times a day? I eat about 5 cups of vegetables a day.
Yeah.
And
what do you see fiber levels? I was curious too, like what generally with women, if we start there, what do you see with their fiber levels usually?
Probably not good. I don't think enough women, unless there are some women that are probably doing well with that, but you got to stick to whole grains. You need fibrous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, all your leafy greens, blueberries, strawberries. If you're doing complex carbs, make sure they're fibrous, lentils, quinoa.
Do you generally set a target for them to try to get to, like between men and women, like daily fiber intake targets, or just more the food sources?
If you're working with me, you'll be hitting about 25 grams of fiber a day.
Got it. That's what I was going to ask. I see like 25 generally for women, 35 for men generally. But do you ever have any gut issues? They come up like saying, they're they're adjusting to the additional fiber. Does that ever come up?
Yeah, it does, especially if you're somebody who that's like a shock to your system
Yeah.
because you have not been eating that much fiber.
Right.
Like, you are the white bread queen, right?
Right. Right.
So yes, and I do say, look, there's over the counter, things you can do to help kind of offset that,
Navigate to that.
keep things, moving. And I'm a big person, advocate of eating celery. I think celery's like, everyone should go research celery. It's like, it is so good for the lining of your stomach, and it's virtually 0 calories,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very fibrous. So, your body's got to do some work to break that down. So that's just a good one to include daily also. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, sometimes people do have a little bit of an issue with the fiber, but it usually gets worked out,
Yeah, I had a dietitian on a couple months ago who that was more their focus was, research and fiber and all that. And they were talking about, I want to say, was it vegan diets? It was like 8 to 12 weeks, the gut microbiome or whatever, the way it digests fiber kind of shifted. So I only bring that up because for people they have to work through it. Like if you're really gassy or you're having a hard time, just continue to work towards that target number, even if it's a struggle, but eventually things are going to shift. And then, you're going to have all the benefits without that transition period. But sometimes you just have to kind of go through that is what I found a little bit. Cause I've heard that with men and women. We're like, yeah, I'd like to eat more, but man, I just get so, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it's because your body's not used to it. Like you need,
right.
you just need more. And then after that, I know people that are triple the daily recommended amount, and they're totally fine because they just been taking it in for that long. So yeah, fiber I think is grossly underutilized, for me included. I just, after that podcast, I right away was like, I haven't measured it in a while. And I measured it. I was like, oh, where's my fiber? I'm like, okay,
better start tracking that. I mean, and another
it.
thing to note too is like people that use, lots of protein powders, and even protein like general protein bars.
Sure.
I mean, those have the macronutrients, like you're going to get the protein that you need and the calories, but a lot of those aren't fortified with vitamins and minerals. So they're void of a lot of nutrition. Again, you get the macronutrients, but for most of them, like that's all you're getting. And sometimes you're not getting much fiber. So always look at that, look to see, did they sprinkle in some extra vitamins in there for me? Did they add a little fiber? That's what I look for, when I'm looking at stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I'm curious too, just for you, along your journey, the next question would be more on a piece of advice, that you've been given in life, that helps shape your approach to like health and wellness. Is something that comes to mind with that?
I think be ridiculously consistent would be what I would like to put out there that has kind of guided me through the multiple years of, living this way, is just be ridiculously consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to a lot of people who change things up constantly, or they do things for 1 week and then they stop. And you just can't make headway when you keep changing things up or you give up too soon. And I had one person walk up to me one time. I was dropping my kids off at school, and this parent walked up to me and said, how do you just want to exercise every day, or eat well? And I said, it's kind of like brushing your teeth. Like you do it because it's right, I think. Right. And when you've been doing it for so long, it just becomes part of who you are too. So, it's hard to get started. It's hard to get there, but you just have to start. And then once you do, just stay consistent and don't lie to yourself. Like make realistic goals, like don't say to yourself, I'm going to work out for 45 minutes, 7 days a week, starting tomorrow, when you haven't been doing anything.
Right.
That's not realistic. So I always tell people, look, small changes over time have the compounding effect.
Yep.
Okay. Eating one salad isn't going to make you a healthy person overall. And
Right.
you're not going to lose weight eating one salad. But if you replace that lunch 5 days a week with a salad and lean protein, what might that have done for you if you look back 6 months from now?
Right.
That's a small change, but
Right.
it can have a huge compounding effect.
Right. Yeah, I think it's some great points there. Because a lot of people, I think you're right. There's a couple things you said there, like motivation wears out, right? So you need consistency, but you also need the wins. Like, just start small to compound that. And I also think you said something really interesting, because I often think about this. I'm gonna use a different analogy first, but I have a really good friend. I read a book years ago, and I actually forgot the wording of this book. And one of the things it talks about, instead of saying I have to, you say I get to. Like, if there's something hard you have to, just even if you say it to yourself, like I get to versus I have to, it just reframes your focus. And then another one was, I'm going to try and do this. We don't try, we do. So, like, don't even say it if you're going to say I'm going to try. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine, and I said that about trying, and he's like, oh, and I was like, thank you, because now, like, that was like a month ago, and I still think of that, because I still find myself saying I'm going to try. So I think the point I'm trying to make is there's two that you said that I want to, like, put an exclamation point on. One is, don't try, do, but make sure what you're going to do, you can do, right? It's like reasonable and realistic.
Right.
But the other is self-identity. I think that's a huge one. Don't, like, for example, do you look in the mirror and say, I'm fat? Right? Like, it's almost like I'm kind of putting this frame. So what do you associate that a fat person, whatever, or obese, whatever the medical term, if you want to use it, whatever the case is, what do they do? Well, they overeat, they don't exercise. If you were to give a stigma, right, of that.
Right.
So I see a lot of people will accidentally label themselves. And it's like, well, just change the wording. I have some extra fat I want to lose. Don't say I'm fat. I mean, that's just one little nuance example. And I know sounds very woo-woo, like when you first hear it, but if you're doing that on 10, 15, 20 years of your life, exactly the word you use, that compound effect, where, like, you're going to start to just associate those things. And when you're going to have a mistake, you're going to miss a meal, you're going to overeat, the shame and guilt, like, no, those are things that are just going to spiral out of control. So just get back on and just keep moving. So, no, I think there's a lot of really good nuggets there that you were saying. I did have one definition I wanted to get from you, because you mentioned, like, functional coaching. We talk about functional medicine a lot. Can you give just your definition of, like, functional coaching? What does that mean in your own words?
Functional coaching, to me, or functional medicine, like that whole arena, is, to me, it's management of you have a lot of control. So strategies to manage your stress, manage your sleep, create, like, a nutrition foundation for yourself, get out in the sun.
Sure.
These are things that, you have a lot of control, and you can do these things for yourself. And that's taking kind of like a holistic approach and a very functional approach. Get to the root cause of something, which again goes back to, like, the foundation of nutrition. Like, ask yourself, am I eating right? Before I go grab this vitamin, like, could I implement in more spinach in my omelet in the morning to kickstart my day? Just doing those things that, again, it's kind of like common sense, I guess, but just the managing of stress, getting sleep, hydrating, nutrition. And, if you're doing all those things, again, going back to this, if you're doing all those things and, you still feel a little off, then, working with a functional doctor and taking that approach, getting your labs done to check things, because you can come up with a really good, customized plan doing that. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to, functional coaching, and is always, let's not just slap a Band-Aid on this. Let's not just, go take this pill, but let's see if we can find the root cause, and then we'll fill the gaps in where we need to with supplementation.
Yeah, I think it's a good definition, and it's a good like separation of what's out there, right? Because I think someone sees a super, not that there's anything wrong with this type of coach, but a super lean, like really, fit coach who's like, buy my app or use my training program. And it's more like like a template approach, which, hey, it's better than nothing. And they're getting a guide there, but maybe what that person needs is a more functional approach. I think, or someone who's like a bodybuilding coach and you're Mr. or Mrs. general population who hasn't strength trained in a while. Is it better than nothing? Probably. But is it the best thing? I think that's questionable. It's where look at someone that can look at the full picture, and that's their approach. It's not that the bodybuilding coach or the athletic coach or whatever is misleading you. It's just, I think it's just, do you need a more holistic approach because you have a negative compound effect with all the things you mentioned between
Right.
activity, sunlight, pre-planning meals, macros, fiber, all these things that are maybe not a straightforward, just let's just get you shredded in 8 weeks type approach. Again, I don't there's anything wrong with that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just for people to delineate and realize what specifically do these people focus in? Because there's a lot of even, good clinics that serve a purpose and they give immediate symptom relief, and that's great. And, when we started First Optimal, like our focus was root cause and functional health. And I just, my hope always, and I know from looking at your content is too, is like, you're not a victim out there. Like there's people that can help you. You just have to self-advocate a little bit. You have to do a little bit of work to kind of align yourself with someone that can help you. And there's really not much we can't test anymore if you're struggling or having issue. There's things from molds and toxins to food allergies to gut health to, as you mentioned, diagnostic with blood work that we can find a lot of these issues and things you're having. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And on my intake form, when the person is wanting to set up a phone call, and this is why I love that snapshot of their life, because I ask them, what causes stress in your life? What is your occupation if you're working? How motivated are you? How much water are you drinking? What does your day look like as far as nutrition? What beverages are you consuming? What is your environment like?
right.
Because that's a big one for people.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I always tell people, look, everyone would be super successful if they lived by themselves on top of a mountain.
Right.
They had no one else to like cause friction in their life or drag them down or tell them they're doing something wrong or whatever. Like if you just went and isolated yourself, you would rock.
Right.
But, the reality is we have all of these environmental things in our life, including friends and family that should be supportive and aren't always. So
I think it's a great point though. And I think it just reminds me again of what you're saying about functional coaching, right? Like looking at the full picture, because I just think of so many people I've interacted with where one was, they just got a promotion. So for 8 to 10 weeks, there's gonna be a high stress, switched up their protocol a little bit during that time period and then landed back where they were before and everything was fine. Or as you mentioned, like who does the cooking in the household? Does your significant other support that you're starting this health journey? Do your kids support it if you have kids at home? Like, do they know? Have you shared it with them? And even encouraging them to share it with their family, like, hey, I'm signing up with this, coach and this is what I want to do, family. Can you guys support me a little bit? Like, I'm not going to ask you to shift everything right away, but you're going to start seeing some changes and just kind of get everyone on board with it, because the support system is just, as you know, and it was noting, it's so important. But that's a part of, in my view at least, and it sounds like in yours as well, is that functional, coaching support. So
absolutely. Yeah. That's probably one of the most mind-blowing things that I've realized in the past 10 years of coaching is that not everyone is supported.
sure.
And that's why sometimes you need a coach, because you need somebody that you can, have in your corner and tell you, no, this is right. You're
Right.
doing this right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, so people out there listening, we're going to have it all in the show notes and all of our posts and things where they can find you. But can you tell a little bit about where people can find out more information about you? They can follow you, reach out, and those type of things.
Yeah. Well, I have the most fun on Instagram. I will say that. But I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, YouTube. And if you click on my Instagram account or my Facebook, I do have my link tree.
Mhm.
linked in there in the bio. And so if you want to fill out, the wellness evaluation, it's in there. You can fill that out. It'll land in my email. And once I see that come through, then you can expect me to reach out to you and set up a phone call. But yeah, that's social media is it's been great. It's helped me grow my business. I've had a lot of fun. And I try to be humorous on some of my posts.
Sure.
I try to cover all bases: humor, seriousness, fitness, obviously food. So,
Yeah.
and
No,
I
it's got,
just,
I was
yeah,
gonna say,
go
if
ahead.
it's educational, it's got to be entertaining as well. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's just not going to sink. So I would second that for those out there. A lot of great content, not only the specifics of what Molly's talking about, but the delivery as well, so that you'll be able to stay engaged with it. So I'd encourage everybody to check out all of Molly's socials, and as I mentioned, those will be linked in the show notes. Any closing thoughts for anybody out there?
Just, if you're on the fence and you've been putting it off, just get started doing something. Because, and if you're not motivated and you're just, you can't get there, just think to yourself, it's the right thing to do.
Right.
When you're a better person, you show up better for the world, you show up better for your family. And when you're eating well and you're exercising, you have more energy. Basically, everything in your life just gets better.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. As we mentioned, be sure to send your questions in, comment, like, and if you really are getting some value out of this, subscribe and follow the channel, because we'll have more content. And then if there's any specific questions for Molly and you send them my way, I'll be happy to ping her as well on your behalf and get those answers for you. But thanks again for tuning into the First Optimal podcast. And thanks a lot, Molly, for joining us today. A lot of great nuggets today in the episode. So appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
All right. We'll see you guys.